Welcome, everyone. My name is Hugo Perez Trejo, and I am the membership coordinator of the Latinx Therapies Action Network. Today, we're going to have a really cool webinar. Its name is Nos Separaron, Culturally and Trauma-Informed Care with Immigrant Communities Experiencing Family Separation. This webinar will be conducted by Gabriela Hurtado. Gabriela Hurtado is a member of the Latinx Therapies Action Network, and she is licensed clinical psychologist and she lives in Austin, Texas. She focuses on mental health of Latin adolescents and adults. Her clinical interests and practice involve crisis intervention, assessment and evaluation, and treatment of acute psychiatric illnesses, such as depression, trauma, PTSD, and eating disorders. Her area of expertise is delivering evidence-based, individual, group, and family interventions at various levels of care. I'm going to pass the microphone to Gabriela, and I hope you enjoy this session.
Thank you so much for having me today. Today, we're going to be talking about family separation in the immigrant community. And I wanted to welcome us to talk about this topic, which is, of course, very personal and close to home for a lot of us. Before we jump into the topics of the day, we'll do a little bit of grounding. And that just really means taking a moment to be here, present in our bodies, so that we can listen to the information that we're going to be talking about today and process some of the questions that we'll have. But this is also an invitation to connect with your mind and your body and attend to what is it that you need as we're talking about this, right? As I mentioned, this topic is very personal and can hit close to home and can bring up a lot of different emotions, especially in these times we're living in. Um, so take your time, take care of yourself as we're talking about this topic today. All right. So for the grounding exercise, the first thing that we'll do is I'm going to invite you to close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. Keep them open and maybe rest your side somewhere that feels comfortable where you can just rest your eyes in. And I want you to start feeling the weight of your body on the chair, on the floor, on the ground, wherever you are. And take a few breaths. And as you take on a deep breath, bring in more oxygen to your body. As you exhale, allow that sensation of relaxation to hit you more deeply. For the next few minutes, there's nothing that needs to be accomplished or done. You can just be here in this moment. You can notice your feet on the floor. Maybe notice the sensation of your feet touching the floor, the weight, the pressure, the vibration. You can notice your legs against the chair, the pressure, pulsing, heaviness, lightness. And continue to take deep breaths, continue to breathe. Bring your attention to your back against the chair, maybe your stomach. Notice if there's any tension or tightness and let it soften. Take a breath and then let go. Whenever your mind wanders, note that you have your breath to come back to it. Notice your hands. Are your hands tense or tight? See if you can allow them to soften. Make any adjustments that you need. Notice your arms. Feel any sensation in your arms. And just breathe. Let your shoulders be soft. Notice your neck and throat. Let them be soft and relaxed. Soften your jaw. Unfurrow your brow. Let your face and muscles be soft. And keep breathing. And then you can notice your whole body present. Take one more breath. Be aware of your whole body as best as you can. Take another breath. As we're sitting here, feel free to move your neck one way, the other. Maybe your neck one way, then the other. You can swallow if you haven't already. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes and join us back in this room. All right, so now that we're all here and present, hopefully that help you release some of the tension, either of coming to this talk or just a week or the upcoming election, or whatever else is in your mind. All right. So we're going to move into talking about the context of family separation in the US and the context really for the rest of the talk, right? Right now, we are in one of the most anti-immigrant moments in US history. We are seeing a lot of high violence in our communities, as well as not only the immigrant community, but I think in general, communities of color. We're seeing a lot of different bills being introduced. I think at the time when I was looking at this data earlier in the year, there was over 200 bills already being introduced in 2024, and I'm certain those are probably changing depending on different state levels, but I'm certain they've increased since then. Um, and we are seeing that there are um, just a lot of different events happening around the world and locally, especially as we, get closer to election times, where there's a lot of conversation about the immigrant community. There's a lot of conversation, as there is in every election. There's a lot of conversations around immigration policies, procedures, detention, um, and other, measures that the government is thinking about. And depending on different aspects of that argument, we're seeing a lot of discourse. So all of this environment right now is causing a lot of different stressors in the communities, a lot of fear, tension. Um, and of course, that is going to get in the way of us being able to get the services that we need for health. We're seeing that historically, when this happens, people will hesitate a lot more to go to the doctor, to go to the ER if they need to, or seeking any other services related to safety. Um, when this is kind of going on, we saw this significantly change and be a lot more relevant in the 2016 election and thereafter. We saw a lot of people not wanting to go to the doctor, go to the store, um, interact with other people, leave their house. There was a lot of intense fear in the community, rightfully so, with everything that was going on then. And right now we're seeing the rise of a similar discourse. So you can imagine that that impact still there. Um, a lot of people are concerned about their family members, their children, having to plan for safety around, the conversation of documentation and anti-immigration policies. I know that in Texas we saw that very significantly with SB4, where there was very strong indications of racial profiling, and that really impacting um, the community in leaving, right, and going to work in um constantly feeling afraid, anxious, fearful that something was going to happen and how that was going to impact their family. The history of family separation in this country is not new. It's been there um, outside of this administration, the past one, and the ones before them. We saw a significant increase in family separations in 2018, where over 2,000 children were separated from their parents at the border. This was the implementation of policies really hoping to deter people from traveling, and we saw a very detrimental impact on the well-being of immigrants. At this point, too, we saw um, in family detention centers um, the way that immigrants and folks that were being treated were dehumanizing. Um, their needs were not being met at all. Um, and it was very much replicating situations, circumstances of violence, a lot of power and control dynamics. Um, we saw people feeling a lot of stress, very similar to PTSD after leaving the facility. Um, and those policies not really changing until really 2023, where a judge started prohibiting family separations at the border for at least 8 years. Um, but a lot of those policies, of course, impacted and broke out families in the community and continue to have an impact on folks. So we have this impact of family separation and trauma. The experience of trauma starts with immigration, right? Like the process of immigration is one that is traumatic by itself. And it starts when we leave home, when we are yanked right from those communities, from what we know, from the safety of our homes, of the safety of our countries in some cases, um, and then move into the United States. I'm going to contextualize it to the United States because this is where we are. Sometimes the conditions in our countries are violent and difficult, and so this decision of moving here is also very complicated. Um, Nonetheless, there is always that sense of being yanked, right, and being pulled, and that is traumatic and difficult in and of itself. Then we have the trip to the United States. For some people, might not be stressful. For some people, might be very difficult. And I'm not only talking about the trajectory, in the many ways that that can happen, but also, right, like sitting with the decision of arriving to a country that isn't yours, with customs, traditions, and a language that you may or may not know very well, and then having to settle here in with different norms and expectations and systems that you need to learn how to navigate. That process is difficult and it is dramatic. And then if we add the context of having to go through family detention centers, having interaction in different ways with the immigration system, um, we have the context of family separation that is of course going to amplify that impact, right? And so we're going to see very high levels of stress, depression, anxiety, and PTSD. We're going to see that show up in the way that we interact in our sense of safety, in the way that we see ourselves, we see the world, we see the hope for the future, right? And so those experiences are very tangible. And then we add the sociopolitical context that we're in right now, where we're coming to a country where We might not feel safe on the day to day when we are hearing this anti-immigrant narrative in speech constantly, especially again during election times. We're going to see like a spike on all this. We saw an increase on hate crimes. We are seeing an increase in violence, right? All of this inflames, right? Everything that our nervous systems are taking in. Some of these things are things that we experience directly. Some things are things that we might see family members, friends, and other people that are part of our community and who we are experience. So we don't have to experience something directly for it to be difficult, traumatic, or impact us. Knowing that this has happened to someone, right, and someone that looks and sounds like us is also going to contribute to that sense of unsafety. When we have these experiences of chronic stress, um, or these different difficult experiences, we're going to start seeing those, as I said, those emotional difficulties start to have more long-term effects in our health. And so that can show up as chronic illnesses, chronic pain. We can start seeing our blood pressure change, having difficulties with even the way that our body is processing food. And so having stomach sensitivities, having headaches, constantly feeling run down or sick, difficulty sleeping, having difficulty concentrating, paying attention. Um, we can have very low energy. We might isolate, right, from other people. And so in turn, those three aspects are going to impact our communities and the way that we connect with one another. We're going to start seeing, if everybody's very stressed, that can cause more conflicts or rifts. If everybody's staying at their homes, we can say more loneliness, right? And separation in and of itself of the community and those channels of support that we know very well. Um, we can start seeing a lot of just worry grow. And they can also be like the positive impacts in that for some people that might bring them closer together. There might be a lot of um, different community initiated um, plans and supports in those things. So I don't want it to be all of it that we talk about it being negative, because of course, like these difficult circumstances can trigger change. But chronic stress can be pretty detrimental to the individual, to the community. Um, and it's somewhere where we want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and we're paying attention to how these different events impact us on the daily so that we know what are the things that maybe we need to do in community, maybe we need to do individually, but we need to be doing something to navigate some of these challenges. So these are some of the things that I was mentioning that we see as impact generally of family separation as well as chronic stress. We're going to start seeing that in physical and health outcomes, isolation, loneliness. It can also impact our ability to interact with different systems, nervousness around, any potential hearings for immigration, or constant worry and rumination and concern about having to be interacting with the immigration system in general. Um, Constantly worrying about how other people might perceive us and what that might result in. It can also create financial hardships if people are having a hard time finding work or going to work, staying at work because of this high level of stress and worry. So again, the main objective, right, is going to be to think about how do we take care of ourselves. And sometimes we think about this in regards of self-care, which is a term that can be complicated because it's been co-opted by the wellness industry. But self-care really means that we're going to be paying attention to what is going on with our bodies and our minds, and we are going to um, also rely on the networks that we have in our community and others to make sure that we are feeling protected, validated, and we can heal slowly and surely from these experiences. Um, So I'm going to invite us to take a moment for reflection, and I want you to think through a couple things. So, what does community mean to you? What does being in community mean to you? What does it mean for you to heal in community? What communities do you belong to? And I want you to think about what makes it, what is it powerful? What is a powerful part of being in a community that might be different from trying to engage in some of these behaviors or strategies by yourself? For a lot of people, community is going to feel like connection is going to feel or be um, the people that they're around, their neighbors, their family members, their friends, the people that they know at work or church. Community might feel like support. Community might feel like warmth or safety. And that in and of itself can be really powerful, especially being an immigrant in this country. Part of what is required that we have to do is to slowly, right, or maybe very quickly, start getting to know other people, start to connect and build community in a different way in a different country. And so finding that place that is safe and where people can show up authentically and feel seen and supported can also bring in relief, can also bring in, as I mentioned, safety. And that can be a very powerful place to be, especially when we are seeing the social context as it is now, where everybody is feeling it. You might be feeling afraid and stressed and worried and really not knowing what the future holds, right? And that uncertainty can be really hard to hold. But holding it with other people and sharing that burden, and relying on one another, that interdependence can be really powerful and can make that load be a little lighter. So now let's talk a little bit about how stress might look like for people, right? Sometimes, especially I think in communities, it's really hard for us to talk about stress in this very when it's related to mental health. We all usually going to be talking about it more in how it feels in our bodies. And so we might be able to recognize that something is going on with us when we notice some of these things, right? Feeling very fatigued. And this is not regular tiredness from like maybe going to bed a little bit later or having to wake up early. This is this constant um, tiredness, low energy that even if you sleep well, you're carrying. Even if there was nothing that day in particular that was stressful or difficult, you still feel it in your body. For some people, that might show up as high blood pressure. And this can become a constant. And then this is why in our communities there's very high levels of cardiovascular disorders, is because of this constant chronic exposure to stress. For some folks, this is insomnia. So for some people, they might go to sleep for a couple hours, then wake up and then be up for the day. A lot of people wake up between 2 and 3 in the morning and not be able to go back to bed and then having to take naps during the day. Um, and that eventually is going to contribute to the sense of tiredness, right? Even when your body is really tired, you might wake up in the middle of the night um, because our brain cannot unplug from those things that are very stressful. For some other people, might show up as dizziness or ear pain, or sometimes like you will hear something in your ear um, that is constantly there, and that can be related to stress as well. Feeling very nauseous or having stomach pain is also part of the stress response. For other people, might be headaches or migraines because we're holding so much tension in our neck and back that that might translate into some very painful headaches. That, of course, those might take quite a while to recover from. Sometimes hours, sometimes days. And so might also impact, right, the ability for us to connect and do other things outside of just trying to survive some of these things. In the extreme, sometimes people can experience chest pain, and it can feel very much like you're having a heart attack. And for some people, that might land them in the ER because they're so worried about not being able to bring their blood pressure down or their heart beating. And so that might translate into chest pain. Um, and then numbness. That can be emotional numbness where it's hard to figure out like what we're feeling in our bodies, but it can also be literal numbness of our limbs, where we feel it's really hard to feel sensation um, in our bodies. Mentally, that might show up a little bit different. We might notice intense restlessness, and that might mean for some people, right, like physical restlessness of constantly having to be moving your legs, moving around, constantly being on the go. But for some people, restlessness is gonna be in their mind, constantly thinking and having a really hard time relaxing or unplugging. And that can also be related to physical agitation or mental agitation, where there's a lot of rumination and thinking. That means like thinking about the same thing over and over again, and then feeling very anxious as a result, um, to the point that it's really hard to just be, right? And slow down. For some people that might experience depression and anxiety, so worry, um, physical symptoms that we were talking about related to stress, constant worrying, having a hard time stopping that worrying, panic attacks, or these very intense expressions of anxiety. For some people with depression, that might show up as very low energy, differences in the way that you are eating, um, sleeping for prolonged periods of time, um, pain, moving slowly, talking slowly, irritability. It can also show up as anger, having nightmares, um, and having nightmares that are repetitive or dreams that are very long or stressful or that feel very vivid. We talked about attention and concentration problems. It's hard to sometimes like even remember things that you just did or pieces of information. You might feel pretty disorganized, um, and therefore sometimes like being very forgetful. Or for some people, that might turn into extreme rigidity, where we have these routines, we create these routines and we have to follow them very closely. Our thoughts might be very black and white. It's either this or that. Things are good or are bad. Um, and then this feeling of impending doom, that might be there. So this can be a really helpful diagram to look at our stress response. Some of the things that I mentioned are going to fall right here in this right area of hyperarousal or in this area of hypoarousal. Um, and then we're going to have like the spaces of dysregulation and the window of tolerance. I really like this diagram because it can give us a visual to how the stress experience can be for several of us, right? So this area of the window of tolerance is when our bodies and minds feel just right. There's nothing that is going on. We are calm, we are alert, we're paying attention to the things around us. We're able to stay focused and calm. And if anything comes up, if we're in the space, we might feel like we can tackle it. We can follow instructions, we can plan, we can organize things, all of that. So the goal is to, be here, or if we are experiencing stress, that we're able to get ourselves back here. Um, so when we're hyper arousal, we're outside of this window of tolerance. Usually there will be something that happened that made us feel anxious or like just not, just agitated in general. And after being there for a little bit, then this can turn into very intense anxiety or anger, feeling like we're out of control, feeling like it's really hard to stop our thoughts, feeling really overwhelmed, and feeling like there's nothing really that we can do that is helpful. So this is where people might experience their fight or flight response. Um, and then for some people, right, the stress, after the stressor happens, we might still see some of that dysregulation, but that might turn as like shutting down, feeling kind of foggy in the mind, maybe feeling sluggish. Um, you might feel uncomfortable, but not necessarily that you're out of control in this like more chaotic space, like mentally and emotionally. You might notice that then after a while, you feel very tired, zoned out. You might have a really hard time identifying what you're feeling or thinking. Um, you might have some time blindness at this point. And for some people, it might feel like they feel frozen or dissociative in this space. Depending on our nervous system, how we're wired, the stressors and our life experiences when a stressor happen, we might be more likely to land on this hyperarousal or hypoarousal space. And sometimes we might go into hyperarousal and after a while move into hypoarousal. So there's many ways in which we will experience this window of tolerance, right? But um, once we're able to notice that we're here in this red orange space, we can talk about what are the things that are helpful to move us, if not to this window of tolerance, closer to it. And that's what we'll talk about next. This can also be helpful to check in with during the day to see where you're at. Am I within my window of tolerance? Are there things that are happening that are making it so that it's harder to stay here? Am I moving to a space of dysregulation or hyperarousal? Because that will also help you identify what is it that you need as a necessary next step. All right, so talking about the different strategies that we can use. So one is going to be to bring awareness to our emotions, right? What is it that is happening for us in our mind, in our emotions? How can we find this middle ground? Um, and going from there, right? Like, how am I feeling in my body? Sometimes like that can be really hard to think through in a moment where stress is high. So one of the ways that I recommend you think about this is like the states of mind, dividing yourself into three: emotional, rational, right? This very logical place where we are, this very emotional place, or kind of in that center. And depending on how you feel, right, you can identify where you are, and then there might be things that might be helpful to do in that moment, such as space breathing or square breathing, where you might breathe in for 4, exhale for 4, hold it, exhale for 4, then breathe for 4 again, and then exhale for 4. And having that pace to it, doing it for a few minutes automatically will slow down your nervous system, make our parasympathetic nervous system kicked in, and then you're going to start noticing that stress response come down. This is when you might also start feeling pretty tired. We can use visualization where we are thinking through different areas that make us feel safe and we can visualize those in detail. Um, for some people, it might be self-soothing, so things that help the senses feel good. So it might be eating a meal that you really like. It might be um, wearing very comfortable clothes, maybe laying down for a little bit. It might also be, having some physical contact with someone. Um, it could be watching things that you really enjoy and that make you feel good. So really anything that is gonna feed your senses and that is gonna be soothing. Then we have compassion and connection. So recognizing that these are difficult situations, stressful situations, and that so if somebody else were to go through that, would probably feel pretty similar, and maybe have some difficult time with it. And then seeking that connection with other people, either through text or in person, and connect with them, allowing for rest and restoration. That might be sleep, that might be laying down, that might be disconnecting your brain for a little bit. And then, of course, learning about stress, how it shows up for you, how it shows up for your community, and start implementing some of these strategies. We cannot attend to what we cannot see or name. When emotions are a lot higher, one of the things that we'll recommend is using temperature, especially ice cold water or ice can be really helpful. This is almost going to reset your nervous system. And those are things that you can put, you can grab like a cold compress and put it on your neck or put it in your head over your eyes. Some people would choose to grab several pieces of ice or put their hands or arms into ice buckets. Some people would like to have a cold shower. However it is for you, if you're feeling very stressed, what this will do is will slow down your nervous system and give you a window of about 20 minutes to then do something else that is distracting or soothing, and then possibly having to do this, uh, ice cold water compress um, trick again, and then again doing something soothing so that that intense emotion can go down. What I mean by intense emotion, I mean emotions where you feel like you have to get rid of it immediately, that it feels unbearable, um, that there's a lot of anxiety or agitation with it, and that nothing that you're doing is helpful. It's to the point that you might not be processing information the same way. It might be hard to listen to other people. It might be hard to get support. And so these are things that you already have at home that you can use pretty quickly. And then sometimes physical activity accompanied by the first one can be super helpful because that will allow you to release that stress, the physical aspect of stress that you're holding in. A body scan similar to the exercise that we did at the beginning, some paced breathing, as I mentioned, and then getting some connection and support. For some people, that might mean joking around, sending TikToks, sending memes, just having a quick chat with someone. For some people, might require like more in-depth conversations, right? And maybe in-person contact versus online. So depending on what you need, right? Allowing yourself to have that and take time for that. So now for the second reflection, I want us to grab all the things that we've been talking about regarding stress, our stress responses, and the strategies to stress, and think about how those apply to you. How do you feel when you're stressed? Who do you become? How do you behave? What are your experiences with stress? For some people, this stress response might be something that you know very well, that maybe you work through, that you already have your strategies that work really good. For some people, this might be newer, and so you might be, thinking through how you might want to start using some of these strategies or maybe curious about some of these things. For some people, you might not know, right? You might not have noticed any responses. So I'm inviting you this moment to think and slow down about how this might be helpful to you. What is it that is coming up for you when you're stressed and what you might want to do? Um, it can also be a moment to think about is there anything in your life that is causing stress or anything environmentally that is going on that might cause stress and maybe getting ahead, knowing that stress affects me this way, what might be helpful for me um, in the future? What might be helpful for me next week? And maybe choosing a couple of these strategies that you already know that work and start thinking about when you might implement them in a more intentional way. For some people, might be trying maybe a couple of these new ones that we went through, and seeing how those work for you now. So if there is a stressful event, that you know that those are under your belt. All right. So moving on to the other pieces of healing, right? It's this sense of being in community. There are many ways that we heal in community, and different practices that we might use um, to share and be in that space. Some might be mutual aid, right? Checking in with other people, seeing what they need, providing for them. And of course, we know that, when somebody else is going through something very stressful, the community will show up and provide that practical support in that moment as needed. Having healing circles in those spaces where we can be and connect with some of our traditions, our breath, our mind, our spirit, um, and notice the impact that different events are having on us and what we might want to do um, to take care of ourselves, um, slowing down in that moment, and having connection with the people around us, um, might be really helpful. Community healing, those might be that might look very different in depending on the community that you're in, right? That can range from having different talks or safe spaces or community spaces, having more traditional practices that are closer to our communities back home. Um, those different spaces where you can talk to other people and connect about the different events that are happening, connect with other people that have been through things that are similar, and maybe experience similar things, and being able to learn from their experience and maybe provide your own perspective and the things that you've done to take care of yourself. Um, that can also mean like different projects that community might develop to create some of that space for community members. Connecting with doulas. There's doulas, of course, we think of birth and birthing, and it can be really helpful to have that support. There's also doulas that help with death and dying, in those transitions. And so making sure that, you can learn more about the doulas in the community, what their services are like, what are the areas in which they can support you, and connecting with them if that feels like it's path you want to take. It can be really helpful to have that personal space to process these really big transitions that we're talking about, as well as faith practices, right? Either attending church or spiritual practices that um, feel very good, that allows us to connect with this higher power in spirit, um, and having that space dedicated for it. Community health workers are folks from the community that are able to help navigate health systems and challenges, and provide advocacy for folks. And of course, we can never forget a peer support, people that have been through what you're going through and are able to provide support one-on-one. In community, we also want to do education and workshops, either online, in person, provide content of the different things that might be going on, and provide information about whatever events are happening, whatever systems we're encountering, and then talk through what are some of the ways that we can attend to it. So workshops can also be really helpful to learn more about the different systems and learning how to fill out different paperwork, where to reach out, how to navigate that, and be able to hands-on do it with the guidance of people. Of course, we always want to have comprehensive support and services, especially for mental and physical systems, crisis services, services that attend interpersonal and domestic violence, services that provide housing, that provide legal support, that provide health services, and that any and all of those different areas that we're attending to or interacting with are able to contextualize someone as um, like an individual as a whole, right? So like all of these different systems are things that we bring into the work that we do, even if we're going in for like a medical appointment or a mental health appointment, or we're going to get some support around housing or anything else. These are all the different areas of our identity and different systems that we interact with. And so support services can be really helpful when they're addressing all those different aspects of oneself. Creativity can be particularly helpful for folks to connect with their emotions and be able to communicate those emotions to other people. That might be painting, that might be singing, that might be poetry, that might be creative writing. However, you can demonstrate that creativity, especially if you can do it in connection with other people, can be really healing. Cultural practices, those things that are core to our community and our culture, and making sure that we are connecting and doing them and putting them into practice. We already talked about connection and healing, and cultural celebrations are going to go with cultural practices, but those are going to be more special for specific dates or times of the year where we're going to be more mindful of certain celebrations or things that are important for us. And here are some resources that I wanted to share, some organizations that provide a lot of support for the immigrant communities, the Immigrant Legal Resource Centers, the Advocates Network, the Catholic Immigration Network, the National Network for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, the National Immigration Law Center, Center for Gender and Refugee Studies, and the Immigrant Defense Project. All of these have websites that have a lot of different resources in there, and that they're kept pretty up to date. And they also have a list of different local chapters of these different organizations when available and what their services are. All right. So now that we've talked about all of these different aspects of family separation, of the immigrant experience, of the community, again, there's different emotions that can show up that you might notice in your body that you might be carrying. And so I wanted to take some time, just a few minutes, to bring in some grounding and presence and letting go in just a moment of calm. So I'm going to invite you again to get comfortable. Close your eyes if that feels okay with you, or rest your eyes somewhere in the room where you can just rest your side. And I'm just going to invite you to take a deep breath and release. You are here. You are safe. All is well. You can notice at this time your breath. You don't need to do anything to change it. Just notice it. And now, as you are breathing in and out, try to make that exhale a little bit longer and connect to that sensation of relaxation as you exhale out. And as you are exhaling out, allow yourself to let go. If your mind wanders, just know that you can always come back to your breath. When you're ready, you can start moving your head one way and then the other, maybe rolling circles with your neck, stretching, moving your arms, moving your legs, swallowing, making any adjustments that you need. And when you're ready, you can come back to the space. All right. Please let us know if you have any questions. We are grateful that I got to share. I'm grateful that I got to share this space with y'all, and that you're here listening. Um, so thank you all then for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. It is always amazing to having you here and sharing resources and your knowledge with folks and the community that they really, really, really appreciate it. And thank you so much, everybody, for being here and watching this webinar. Please share this video with your colleagues or people who might be interested. Remember, if you want to know more about the work we do, visit our website, eltan.org, or visit our Instagram page, Latinx Therapist Action Network. And if you have any questions, comments, send us a message to info@eltan.org. And I hope that you have a great day and that we can see each other very soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.